Hello. Federal grant and loan funding is flowing again following a pause that caught many nonprofits by surprise. We'll talk to the leader of one organization about what happens next. Plus, the Heinz History Center has a number of events scheduled for Black History Month. A curator is here to share what you can see. And members of the world's oldest African-American sorority are here to share how they're celebrating 117 years of service. So pull up a chair and meet us at the corner. Intersection starts right now. Hello, I'm Lisa Smith, the Director of Community Impact at KDKA+ and the host of Intersections. It's been a difficult few weeks for nonprofits and their employees that rely on federal funding. A move to freeze those funds has been on pause, but the uncertainty is still there for organizations that are wondering if the funding could stop again. AJ Jefferson is joining us today. She is the CEO of the Homeless Children's Education Fund. Thanks so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
Yeah, so obviously, you know, HCEF has been around for 25 years. Yes. Give people just a little sense of what you guys do.
Absolutely. We are Homeless Children's Education Fund, so it says it right there in the title. We make sure that the students who have been identified as homeless, and there are almost 3,500 in our county, have the education supports they need. We make that support accessible to them, so we go to them. We don't ask them to come to us. So we have a variety of different programs that we involve our students in. And our primary goal is getting them through high school graduation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, people talk about the numbers, but the number is pretty large when it comes to children who are experiencing homelessness in this region.
Absolutely. So there are 3,496 specifically in the county, almost 47,000 in the state of Pennsylvania, and close to 3 million across the country.
Right. So we're talking about the freeze or potential freeze on federal funds for a lot of programs around the country. So what was your reaction, you know, when you heard about this change?
Honestly, it was concern, because we support students that need those dollars. When you think about freezing federal funding, you're talking about taking away education programs, so federally funded after-school programs, federally funded programs that support students with disabilities. You're referring to SNAP benefits, so benefits that families need in order to make ends meet. You're talking about health care, Medicaid, that is provided to students, provided to families that are economically challenged. Those programs, in essence, will be taken away from those families. And those are the people that we support at HCEF every single day.
Now, does HCEF get direct funding from the federal government?
We do not receive direct funding from the federal government, and that is strategically designed. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to be impacted eventually. When we think about the largest grant that HCEF has ever received, it's the Violence Intervention and Prevention Grant. Well, there's some federal funds that flow through that grant as well. And so we're concerned, and I'm asking every single day our public policy experts, are we going to be impacted? That $640,000 that we received, will we still receive that money? Because one of the programs being unfunded or defunded, excuse me, is the Violence Prevention Program.
So, you know, have you heard from young people, parents?
Yes.
And what are they saying, you know, listening to this dialogue and, you know, basically not knowing what the status is?
They're afraid. Plain and simple. They don't know from one day to the next what's going to be taken away from them. So we as nonprofits have to be the solution. So what I have said to my team and what I've heard through the nonprofit community is that we're getting prepared. We're going to our donors, we're going to our board, we're going to the community, and we're saying, listen, in the case of HCEF, we only budgeted $10,000 for emergency funds this year for our students. We are now in a campaign to raise $50,000 to $75,000 in anticipation of what will come. We believe it will happen.
Yeah, it's because right now, like we were saying, it's on pause.
Yes.
But there's been so much discussion and I guess a lot of uncertainty. So that uncertainty, I guess, is like you were saying, it's kind of forced you guys to kind of reassess and decide what do you do next. But what does that uncertainty do for, you know, the young people that you serve?
It causes stress, you know. They're dealing with being unsheltered, so they already have a measure of stress and instability and safety concerns. But when their families are watching the news or listening to people and having conversations and potentially thinking about the loss of SNAP benefits, the loss of medical benefits, and whatever else happens, the after-school programming that the children go to, that they're consistently going to, could be taken away from them. When consistency leaves a child experiencing homelessness, there's a cycle that happens that can't be overcome for years, a social emotional cycle that happens in that child's life. So you're dealing with the only thing that they can grab a hold of and say, hey, I can see Miss Kate every other day. Well, that Miss Kate might be taken away from them because Miss Kate's program may be unfunded eventually. And that's hard for any child to bear. But a child that's experiencing being unhoused and moving from place to place, it's very much so unbearable for them.
Yeah. So in a sense, the double whammy is that your organization is around education, and there's a lot of also talk about the education department perhaps being, you know, defunded. Going away, defunded, or dissolved.
Yes.
Something along that line. So how does that impact what you do?
Well, number one, not only were we talking about systematically dismantling the Department of Education from a federal standpoint, all of those funds that push through school districts, you're talking about a potential loss of paraprofessionals for students who are experiencing any type of disability. You're talking about a loss of schools, right? Because federal fund keeps certain schools up and active and alive and open to our students. You're talking about social workers possibly being taken out of schools. All of those extraneous dollars or extraneous opportunities for students to feel safe, secure, and educated are on the chopping block right now, and we have to really understand what the potential could be. Federally, in the state of Pennsylvania, we receive billions of dollars to support all different types of programming that supports the least of us. If the federal government stops supplying that money, we're going to be in a tailspin.
Well, we are going to continue, you know, to check in with you and some other organizations and just kind of make sure that we're understanding and learning what is happening so that everybody has the information.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, coming up, what you can see at the Heinz History Center for Black History Month. Intersections. We'll be right back. Well, there are many events happening around Pittsburgh for Black History Month, and of course, that includes the Heinz History Center. Samuel Black is the center's Director of African American Programs, and he is joining us here on Intersections. Thanks so much, Sam, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. So obviously, the Heinz History Center has a very, very nice, thanks to you, this display called From Slavery to Freedom. It's a permanent exhibit. So for those who maybe haven't been or haven't seen it, kind of tell us a little bit about what is in it.
Well, we're really proud of From Slavery to Freedom. It's an award-winning exhibit, and it opened in 2012, so it's 12 years old. It's one of our long-term exhibits. But it really chronicles the plight of people of African descent from West Africa to 21st century Pittsburgh. And what a lot of people may not know is that Pittsburgh was very significant in the abolitionist movement. So we tell the story of various abolitionists in Pittsburgh and Allegheny City, which is today the North Side, and their sort of movement to free people who were held in bondage in mostly the southern states. And we also make a connection between the abolitionist movement and the civil rights movement. So you can see the continuation of the Black struggle for freedom.
Yeah. Frederick Douglass spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh.
Frederick Douglass came to Pittsburgh a number of times. To me, the most significant was in 1847 when he came to meet with Martin Delany.
Yes.
And it was at that meeting that they talked about joining forces to publish a new newspaper. And they jointly edited the newspaper called the North Star, which most people recognize as Frederick Douglass's paper. Delany was sort of the traveling correspondent. So he traveled around Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, other parts of the North to report on the abolitionist activities taking place in those areas. And this would have been around 1849, 1850, 1851. And so, Delany and Douglass really met at Delany's home in 1847 and began the North Star newspaper.
Wow, it's so interesting, right? So some of those events also, you have additional events that are happening at the Heinz History Center. One is a virtual film viewing. Tell us about that.
The film is called The Hero, and it is our first film screening of 2025, a part of the From Slavery to Freedom film series that we started in 2012. And the film is about, it follows two people, or tells the story of two people in Angola, West Africa, who were survivors of colonialism and the Civil War in Angola. So it kind of picks up in 1975, and it looks at the resiliency of Angolan people through these two individuals' lives, of how they've been able to basically live in a country that has basically been fighting the Civil War for almost 30 years, from 1975 to the early 2000s. And so it's a really great movie that gets into the backdrop of the Cold War, because the warring factions in Angola, MPLA and UNITA, MPLA was supported by Cuba and the Soviet Union, and UNITA was supported by South Africa and the United States. And so that kind of prolonged this civil war. Up to around 800,000 Angolans perished in that civil war. So it really just tore the country apart. And the film kind of talks about how Angolans are trying to rebuild their lives and their country.
Yeah. The other thing you have coming up is a lecture with the son of a civil rights activist. Tell us about that.
David Dennis Jr., who most people will probably recognize as a sports journalist on ESPN and so forth. But his father was David Dennis Sr., who was a freedom rider during the civil rights movement. And David and his father collaborated on a book called The Movement Made Us. And it allows his father to tell his story as a freedom rider. He was someone who was a personal friend and a comrade in the civil rights movement with Medgar Evers. And a number of others, with Bob Moses. So he worked with SNCC. He worked with freedom riders. He worked with a number of other civil rights organizations in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. He was one of those hundreds of people who was constantly thrown in jail, whose life was on the line, who was beaten numerous times just to make sure that people had the right to vote and their constitutional rights were respected and upheld in this country. So we're really proud of what David and his father was able to do to tell this story. The book will be available at the lecture on February 20th. So we hope people will come out and have a conversation with David.
Yeah, and we're showing right now like all of the events. The film, The Hero, that is on February 12th at 5:30, and the David Dennis lecture is on February 20th at 6 o'clock. And then people can go to HeinzHistoryCenter.org/events to register, correct?
Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, coming up, local members of the oldest Black sorority in the world are here to share what's planned for their Founders Day. Intersections. We'll be right back. Well, pink goes good with green, and it's been a thing before Wicked. Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority has been around for more than a century, 117 years to be exact. And the members of the Pittsburgh chapter are celebrating their Founders Day, upcoming very soon. Here to share more details are the president of Alpha Kappa Alpha's Alpha Alpha Omega chapter, Peggy Harris, and the chairman for the Founders Day event, Patrice Wade Johnson. Thank you all so much for being here with us. We appreciate it. And just full, transparency, I'm also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority.
Yes.
So Peggy, tell us a little bit about the sorority and, how it kind of got started and what happens.
So we are so proud that 117 years ago, 9 bold women from Howard University in 1908, January 15th, carved out this vision for a sisterhood that was bold, and that we would be a support to women in college, and that we would care about our local community and be a beacon and service to all mankind. Mm-hmm. And so it was a first, so we're really proud to always say that we are the first African-American college-educated sorority in the world.
Yeah.
And so that was the origin of it. Others obviously have come afterwards, and we share a lot of common ground. But we have held to our early ideals and continue to program in a number of different ways that have great impact on the community. We're proud here in Pittsburgh that we are actualizing the national focus, which is Soaring with Sisterhood and Service. And in that, we program and serve across this community and region on some level to impact families. We do that in a number of ways. We're working with young people in leadership development. We're also resourcing families and addressing child hunger. Mm-hmm. And so a couple times a week, a month, we are preparing these power packs mm-hmm. that are branded from our national organization. Mm-hmm. And in those, we make those available to students at Miller Academy. And what we have learned is that we've seen a boost in attendance mm-hmm. on the days that we are packing and resourcing these families with non-perishable goods. Yeah. So we're having an impact on that. We're also working with families or the community in addressing or making aware of mental health, starting with our own members and providing a space for people to catch their breath and for focus on their own well-being and encourage self-care. Mm-hmm. We're also in the community improving our environment. We are a 10-year program, a participant in PennDOT's Adopt a Highway program, so we're proud of that. So twice a year we show up at the Squirrel Hill exit and clean the lots and mm-hmm. make the environment more beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
And we do tree planting.
Yeah. Tree planting and so much. Yeah. The other thing, though, is Alpha Alpha Omega has been around for almost 100 years.
Yeah, in 1927. We mm-hmm. were founded in April 21st of 1927. So in 2 years, we will be celebrating our centennial anniversary. So we have quite a legacy here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. So, Patrice, talk a little bit about this Founders Day. It's really a weekend, right, of events that are kind of happening, at least a couple of days.
It is. And one of the things that we looked at, when you look at our founding, it is this celebration of sisterhood and service, that those, the brilliance of those 9 young women to lay this blueprint. And so we wanted to make sure this year that we are uplifting that. And so we have the celebration, 117 years of sisterhood and service. And we are, not promoting, but we are making sure that we are uplifting the service that we do. As a part of our weekend celebration, we have some community awards that we're given. One is to the Hill District Consensus Group, because they're aligned with one of our initiatives, Uplift Our Community. And we're also giving one to an individual, Bernard Alexander. And he is aligned with not only uplift our community, but empower our economic wealth. And so we wanted to make sure, as a part of our celebration, that we were including those people who are also doing the work that we are saying is so vitally important. Part of the weekend festivities is going to acknowledge the members of the chapter who also did a service project with Jubilee Kitchen. And we were able to go in and be a part of, because sometimes if there are things that exist in your community, if you don't know exactly what that is, like, I heard of it, but to actually go in and to be a part of the service provision that's going on, and then to also, what else can we do to help in that? And so there was a need for coats and hats and gloves and blankets, and we were able to provide that for them, that they can continue in the services that they do and supplement not only the feeding of the population, but to provide some outerwear for them for those times when the shelter may be closed and they have to be outside in the weather.
Yeah, and we have the information on the screen, Blazers and Brunch. Is that February 16th?
So that is February 15th.
Okay.
So it is Blazers and Brunch, because we are about the business of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And so this year our theme is celebrating 117 years of sisterhood and service, but it's Blazers and Brunch, so that we come in there about the business.
Yes, and I know you have a church service, a joint church service with whoever wants to come to that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're also featuring at our church service, for the repast of the church service, the gospel choir at Kappa is coming to participate and perform at that. So we're really excited, just about being a part of the community, as well as having this celebration for our 117th year.
Well, it sounds like a wonderful weekend, ladies, and thank you both so much for coming. And I know we'll have you guys come back to talk about something else coming up pretty special later on.
Absolutely,
All right.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for having us.
You're
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you.
And I'll have my last word when we come back. Competition. There's a big one happening between Kansas City and Philadelphia. No matter who you root for, competition can be fun, spirited, exciting. Some even say competition is healthy because it motivates you to work harder, smarter, be more creative for the win. But no one wins alone. There's always a team supporting, encouraging, and coaching. In essence, competition is more than winning, it's your community. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Intersections.